You wouldn't believe it. Another stumble today by Labor leader Anthony Albanese. He's trying to disguise it, but is tripping over his feet again on economic policy. And it's amazing. This time making promises on wages that he didn't mean and cannot keep. And again, you have to ask, does Albanese actually understand his own policies? Does he understand how our economy works? And these are very serious questions because thousands of Australian jobs depend on this if he wins the election. Maybe your job. We already know that Albanese started this election campaign thinking that unemployment was much higher than it actually is.
National unemployment rate.
National unemployment rate at the moment is, I think it's 5.4. Sorry, I'm not sure what it is.
We also know Albanese didn't know the cash rate, the foundation of interest rates. He thought also that there were more nurses than there actually are, promising a nurse in every nursing home 24/7 when we don't actually have enough already. Now we know from the debate on Sunday that Albanese also thinks there are far more people working 3 jobs than there actually are.
We've seen this plethora of growth in labour hire and contracting out. We have 500,000 Australians who are working 3 or more jobs. Now, they're not doing that out of choice.
In fact, Albanese exaggerated the number of people working 3 jobs by more than double. We also learned on Sunday that Albanese's campaign slogan, "Everything is going up under the Liberals except your wages," is actually something you can't fix, much as it is implying the opposite. He's been making this implied promise that he's going to raise your wages, but he doesn't have the power to do that and doesn't really mean it. In fact, on Sunday, he couldn't and wouldn't guarantee any such thing.
But just to summarise, you can't guarantee that real wages will rise.
The difference between myself and the current government and Scott Morrison is that we will try to do what we can.
So this is a guy describing an economy that doesn't exist and making promises on wages he can't keep. And put under pressure on this talk about increasing your real wages, how exactly? Albanese today crumbled again. He made a promise on the run on the minimum wage, backing a huge increase to be ordered by Fair Work Australia that would be disastrous even if he meant it, which it seems he doesn't.
I believe the minimum wage should at least keep up with the cost of living. Labor will put forward, in government we would put forward a separate submission based upon Labor's claim, but we think no one should go. Backwards. People should be at least keeping up with the cost of living.
Does that mean you would support a wage hike of at least 5.1% just to keep up with inflation?
Absolutely.
In fact, raising the minimum wage by more than 5% would be disastrous for every struggling cafe owner or farmer or small business owner who would then either charge more, they'd have to charge customers more, or earn even less themselves, or maybe they'd put off workers, I don't know. But as it turns out, Albanese probably didn't quite mean that promise either. His staffers afterwards privately used that old excuse that they've fed journalists before when cleaning up an Albanese mistake. Oh, he didn't quite hear the question, not the end of this question. Albanese wants higher wages, not necessarily 5.1% higher. And even campaign spokesman Christina Keneally at first was snapping at journalists, claiming, they're just misinterpreting his clear answer.
You got in economic advice along these lines to say it's reasonable to lift wages or the minimum wage by 5.1%?
Kieran, first of all, that is a misstatement of what was said today. What Anthony made clear is that people's wages should keep pace so that they can pay for the rising costs of living.
Well, you can either believe Christina Keneally or believe your ears. Take your pick. Journalists actually ran after Albanese to check if in fact he had just made another mistake, and I think he has. Because who announces a big policy like this just in response to a journalist's question?
Thank you.
Did you make a mistake, Mr Albanese?
Yes, he has. Although so far he doesn't dare say so. He can't admit to another mistake. But former Prime Minister John Howard an hour ago with Chris Kenny couldn't believe this idiotic promise or mistake.
I don't know what economics degree he got to lead him to say that. And in the end, the only really effective wage rises are those that have got some productivity element in it. Now, we all like to see our wages going up. That's human nature, and I understand that there are cost of living pressures, although they've always been there. There've always been cost of living pressures, but you've got to make sure that wage rises are affordable, and you also got to make sure that wage rises that can be afforded by some companies and some firms aren't imposed on small businesses that can't afford them.
You know what I think actually happened today? I think Albanese suddenly realised he had to say yes to that question, 5.1% increase, an increase that many bosses can't afford, because otherwise he'd suddenly be exposed as a fraud right in front of these journalists. Because if he didn't say yes to a 5.1% wage increase, never mind if we can afford it, he would have to admit that even under an Albanese Labor government, prices would still rise faster than inflation. Exactly the opposite of what Labor has been implying. So what could he do? What he did was make this promise today that even Christina Keneally thought, oh no, have we misinterpreted that? It's that dumb. Or, as John Howard put it tonight,
I'm not in the business of casting generalised aspersions, but he does give the impression of somebody who's not across the detail.
no, Albanese is not on top of the economic detail. And what's really amazing is that everyone knows that Albanese is not actually, promising some big, new, complicated reform. He's not pushing a whole new GST like John Hewson did or like John Howard did. He's not promising any great big new schemes like an NBN that has got to get on top of all the detail, a tricky policy to stop the votes. There's not much actually that is promising that he has to remember. Not many details to get on top of. And yet, he still stuffs up this often. This is not just bizarre. It is a warning. How can Anthony Albanese run an economy that he doesn't even understand?